Smoke from Canadian wildfires poured into the U.S. East Coast and Midwest over the past week, covering the capitals of both nations in an unhealthy haze, holding up flights at major airports, postponing baseball games, Major League and Little League, and prompting people to fish out pandemic-era face masks. Canadian officials asked other countries for additional help fighting more than 400 blazes nationwide that already have displaced 20,000 people. Our next guest, John Vaillant, is an acclaimed award-winning nonfiction writer and reporter. His new book is eerily timed. It came out just last week. It is called Fire Weather, a true story from a hotter world. He writes about May 2016, Fort McMurray, the hub of Canada's oil industry and America's biggest foreign supplier, which was overrun by wildfire. The multi-billion-dollar disaster melted vehicles, turned entire neighborhoods into firebombs, and drove 88,000 people from their homes in a single afternoon. Through the lens of this apocalyptic conflagration, the wildlife equivalent of Hurricane Katrina, John Vaillant warns that this was not a unique event, but a shocking preview of what we must prepare for in a hotter, more flammable world, just as the fires we are seeing now is also a preview. Again, the name of the book is Fire Weather, and we welcome John Vaillant to the program this morning. Thank you very much for being with us. An honor to have you on the program.
Oh, so good to be with you, Joe.
I said this in the introduction, but it can't. This could not be more eerily timed for us in the East Coast who are dealing with the impact of fires in Canada, of you writing about this fire in 2016. And you warn us all through this book. And this is basically another warning and another tap on the shoulder of, oh, yeah, this is still happening.
It never stopped happening. And I think if you talk to a climate scientist or a forest hydrologist or a wildfire fighter, they might say, well, so now you're noticing us, but we've actually been dealing with this for the past 20 years. And so it's, these are regional events as huge as they can be and have been, thus far, relegated to the Canadian and American West, maybe Australia, maybe Siberia. And what we see is this expansion that has been predicted as soils and forests continue to dry out, as they have been doing really for the last half a century due to climate change.
What is, if anything, what is different about the fires that we're seeing now as compared to the Fort McMurray fire?
I think they're part of the same trend, and I would call it 21st century fire. And that was really when the turn of the century, when we started to notice, firefighters and fire scientists started to notice dramatic changes in fire behavior. And, one of the early harbingers of that was the fire tornado in Canberra, Australia. And, it is as bad as it sounds. It is a EA3 tornado that emerged out of a wildfire. And so you really have the worst of both worlds. You have 165 winds coupled with inferno temperatures. And it was extremely destructive. And one of the questions was, well, when will this ever happen again and where? And that question was answered in 2018 in Redding, California. And that was absolutely devastating. 5 people were killed. And I went to the site shortly afterward. And the destruction, Joe, was nuclear. Cast frying pans with the handles torn off and holes through the bottom, 100-foot high-tension pylons torn out of the ground and thrown into the forest, cars ripped in half, everything burned. And it's truly apocalyptic. It's an energy release that I had never seen, not surprisingly. I'm just a journalist, but the local firefighters who have, they're California firefighters. They have seen some big ones, and they had never seen energy like that or destruction like that. And so this is a continuation. And so what we see now in Alberta, which is a famously fire-prone place, half of it is boreal forest where big fires occur anyway, naturally, but they've burnt more acres there this month of May than they ever have in the historical record. So we're in for a heck of a summer across the continent.
I was talking to a California friend just a day or two ago, I guess about 2 days ago, and they said, "Well, are the skies orange yet?" And I said, "No." And then the next day, the skies were orange, and the friend said, "Well, yeah, there you go." And what does that signify?
Yeah.
What's happening when the sky is that orange?
I had that exact same exchange, Joe, with a friend in Brooklyn, and I wrote a piece in Time magazine about that color and what it does to not just to our lungs and noses and eyes, but to our psyches. It's very, very disturbing and disruptive to our sense of place and sense of comfort and safety and where we live to see the skies turn that color. And what you are seeing is colossal amounts of carbon, burnt forests, could be American forests, could be Canadian forests. In this case, in the case of the Northeast right now, as we speak, it's Canadian forests, principally Quebec, but also coming all the way east from Alberta. And these particulate, when you gather them in dense enough collections, as are being done now, literally change the color of the sky and change our experience of it. And these are toxic clouds. If you have pulmonary or cardiovascular issues, you really need to take care. Wearing a mask is not a bad idea. Exercising is a bad idea unless you're in a filtered place. It's no fooling. And what it tells us, though, is that we are all connected, and that one way or another, we are all downwind or downstream from everybody else. And so the things that happen in Canada, the things that happen in the Pacific Ocean, the things that happen in the Gulf of Mexico impact all of us one way or another. And it's just a really graphic and frankly tragic demonstration of that interconnectedness.
One of the things that you write about in the book about this Fort McMurray fire in 2016 is that officials took the fire very, very seriously. And they had the forecast, they had the information, and they knew a wildfire was approaching. And yet, you write, there was very little they could have done. So where does that leave us now? Is there still very little we could have done?
There is. It depends on what you mean by doing. If what you're doing is preemptive evacuation, there's a lot more we could do. And they did not evacuate as preemptively as they might have in Fort McMurray, despite the fact that all the signs, the long-term forecast, the short-term forecast, the 12-hour forecast, all pointed to catastrophic firestorm conditions blowing in the direction of the city of Fort McMurray. That was all on the table and understood. And there is a bit of an interpretation problem that occurs really across the human race with people who are described a reality been experienced by them yet. And so if I tell you, well, this might happen, this could get really bad, you're going to refer to your own definition of what really bad is. You're going to remember the blizzard of 78, or you're going to remember Hurricane Ian, or something like that, and that's going to be your reference point.
Right.
And what climate scientists have been saying is, no, this is new. And the Buffalo blizzard in January was a really good example of that. This is a life-threatening event, and we lost 50 American citizens in that blizzard, and in part because no driving ban was issued. And so people in Buffalo, I think, thought, we know blizzards. Don't tell us about snow. We know how bad it is. We can handle this. But what climate scientists are telling us, no, this is new. You might not be able to handle it. And so we need to treat it differently. We need to respond differently and proactively.
I want to talk about that proactive aspect in a moment. The name of the book is Fire Weather, A True Story from a Hotter World. The book is published by Knopf. John Vaillant is our guest this morning on the Roundtable. As you see it, if you're Justin Trudeau and your President Joe Biden, what should those leaders be talking about right now?
They should be declaring in a unified way, along with Europe and any other country that is free enough to join them. They should be declaring a global climate emergency. And how you respond to that is by transitioning away from fossil fuel burning as rapidly as possible. So you do it the way we responded to the pandemic. You do it the way Europe and the United States have responded to the invasion of Ukraine. You don't wait till the next election. You get on it that week, and you bear down until you've actually changed the chemistry of the atmosphere. And that's what needs to happen. We have changed it one way by burning fossil fuels on a scale that really has never happened before, certainly in human history, and almost never in global history. Become our own supervolcano, if you will, when you gather our cumulative combined emissions together in our atmosphere.
When you think that California's 10 biggest fires ever have been in the last 2 years, I mean, that's astonishing. And what we're seeing, of course, in Canada and what we're feeling now on the East Coast. Again, back to the California friend, it just seems that what more do we need, I guess, is the question I'm asking, John, of what more evidence do you need that something needs to be done before you stop scratching your head saying, gee, how's this happening?
I think we need to understand how captive we are to the lifestyle and to the influence of the petroleum industry. And, they have allowed us to live in ways that only kings and queens could dream of previously. And really, it's been miraculous. We've been able to become richer and more mobile and faster and stronger because of this extraordinary fuel. But it is now proving itself to be deleterious to our present and to our future. And we really have to face that squarely. And that's something you can really see Canada struggling with right now, where you have the premiers of entire provinces, the equivalent to the governor, refusing to discuss climate change, refusing to act in a meaningful way, instead pointing the finger at arsonists. I mean, it's bizarre. It is ludicrous, and it's irresponsible, and that's where our politics are. And the citizenry have choices they can make, and they have incredible influence that they can wield. And we as citizens need to connect the dots between what is happening in our skies and what is happening in our forests and what is happening in our governments and our government's policies, depending on who we elect. Climate science isn't rocket science, and the solutions to our dilemma aren't rocket science either. Really, it's as simple on one level as stop burning stuff so much. And then, we need to obviously make this energy transition, which is totally possible, and it's literally happening as we speak. We're going through a transition right now. Oil and gas are peaking.
You write about Stephen Pine, who is a fire expert, a prominent fire expert, and who likens what happened in 2016 as watching polio or plague return, and those seem to be apt, right? I mean, this that we get lulled into a false sense of security, and then fire just rolls through, and it seems at that point we've lost time, right?
We've lost a lot of time. Climate scientists and even oil companies have understood the direct connection between industrial CO2 and climate change since the 1960s. You might not have even been born then, but I was a small child. But that's how long we've known.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. A generation at least. And there really was a moment, and I've documented it in this book, when another path was identified and even signed on to in principle by large oil companies in the late 70s. And then there was a change of heart when they realized that, wait a second, we're in the CO2 business. And there was no way to separate those two. And please don't be fooled by climate capture. There's no way that can be scaled up in a meaningful way to deal with what we need to deal with. And Darren Woods, the CEO of Exxon, just said, we will never be an electron company. We are a molecule company, meaning we are going to keep burning. He has said that. He has no intention of participating in this transition. And so stockholders, governments, citizens have to take matters into their own hands because it's really our destiny and our children's destiny that's at stake here.
So another way of putting it, for them, it's just the cost of doing business.
There is this extraordinary disconnect, and I really liken it increasingly to a kind of orthodox religion, that they have created a reality that is so durable and effective for them that it's based on fossil fuel burning, that it is almost heretical to consider something else. And it certainly will compromise their future and their existence and certainly their stock price. And what you see, if you really look closely, and I did some of this, looking at closely of how these oil companies are sort of reconfiguring themselves, they know the end is coming. And they are putting on a brave face, and nobody wants to give up the gravy train. You know, all of us generally like doing what we're doing. We like our status quo. It's comforting. And we don't want to give it up or change. And we can be forced to change, or we can try to anticipate and embrace, what could be a quite exciting and much cleaner new reality.
We're just about out of time, so let me end here, which is the thing that I took away from the book. I mean, obviously there's a lot of information that we've been talking about what has to be done and what we have to do. But you write so amazingly about the power of fire, this atom bomb-like damage that is possible with fire. It's really stunning as to what something this hot can do. It
is. And what's amazing, it's been our companion since we became a species. But it also has its own ambitions, if you will. What we have done through our deep devotion to this incredibly potent energy is actually created a world in which fire can combust more easily. And so it's really fair to say that there has never in human history been a better time to be a fire than right now. And that's what we're seeing all across Canada. And there are some huge fires burning in Michigan, fires burning in Scotland, which is not a place we think of when we think of wildfire. Fire is burning now where it's never burned before in human history. And we have facilitated that. And we also have the means to reverse that.
Do you feel a need to see what's happening right now, or have you already lived through that?
Oh, no. I was in Vancouver when we won the crown for worst fair in the world, and I am painfully familiar with those orange skies that New Yorkers and Washingtonians are suffering with right now, and it was as new to us as it is to them. I mean, that didn't happen in the Pacific Northwest until around 2015, 2017. It was a real rarity prior to that. And now it's something we dread every summer. And so we are living through it, and I don't want to make it worse. I'm highly motivated as a citizen, as a human being, and as a parent to reverse this trend because we can. We can do this. I really feel confident in that.
The name of the new book is Fire Weather, A True Story from a Hotter World. It is published by Knopf. John Vaillant, thank you so much for being with us. A great pleasure to have you on the program.
Joe, thanks for reading, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about it. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Be well. Again, the name of the book is Fire Weather. It is published by Knopf. You're listening to The Roundtable.